Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Lessons in Savvy Living. I am your host, Sia Knight. And as you all know, Lessons in Savvy Living is an opportunity for me to have real women telling real stories and sharing real lessons. So I wanted to have a number of people from a number of different backgrounds. Now, this particular guest has kind of a similar background to me, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of how she has made a different type of shift. So, first, without saying anything else, I will say hello, Kristen Wilson. How are you?
Hel- Hello, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great today. I'm doing great. So, before we get started with any of the content, what are three things that people should know about you?
Ah, such a great question. Well, okay, three things that people should know about me. The first is I'm a certified life coach. I'm really excited about that because that's actually brand spanking new.
Oh,
Just
great.
finished up my life coaching certification, so that's exciting. The second thing is that I love helping women to create a life and business of their dreams. I love doing that work. And the third thing is that if you hang around me long enough, I might just ignite something in you to help you to unleash your true purpose. I am very good at that.
Oh, okay. So just even by osmosis, you will get our whole entire life just by
you
interacting with you.
Yes, you will feel something. You will feel a shift. That is what I have been told.
Okay, now. So, all right. Well, let me get this going because I'm ready to shift. So, today's episode, I'm going to have Kristen tell us a little bit about her journey from educator to entrepreneur and one who creates shifts in other people. So talk to me, Kristen. How did you get here from being an educator?
Yes, such a great question. And I'm actually going to take you on a little journey with me. I'm going to
Okay.
tell you a little story about how I landed here because this is not at all what I envisioned as a young girl. Growing up, I have always wanted to be a teacher. It was either a teacher or a pediatrician. That's what I would say when people would ask. Now, secretly, I also wanted to be a writer, but that didn't seem like a career that was very popular.
Hmm.
And so I just kind of hid that to the side. And I would keep going with my teacher or pediatrician. I was that little girl who would put the dolls together in the bedroom and play school and drag my brother in, and he would have to be a part of that journey too. At the tender age of 22, I actually became a teacher. So I, finished out my education in college and got my Bachelor of Arts in elementary education. And it felt so aligned. I was so excited to be able to enter a career that I always wanted to do, right?
Hmm.
No more playing with dolls, no more grading fake papers. It was the real thing. And I started my career as a second grade teacher, which was amazing. I still think back on that first year and I just think, wow, I learned so much. That was the hardest, most rewarding year ever. And I was the kind of teacher who poured my heart and soul into what I did. I literally would go to work, teach my kids, come home. I would stay up late. I would plan these amazing lessons down to the detail.
Hmm.
I would, pull my props and things around the house to get ready for the next day's activities. I would make sure that I had exactly what I needed for every single child. I thought about each individual child's needs and wanted to make sure that I met those needs. And so I did that from the beginning, right? I literally, my identity was wrapped around being a teacher.
Hmm.
And with my identity being wrapped around being a teacher, that was my everything. When people would ask me, what do you do? I'd meet them. I would proudly say, I'm a teacher.
Hmm.
felt so easy. It felt like, people respected that job, and, I was doing my life's work. Everything was perfect, right? And, you know, I continued building my career as a teacher. I got a master's in literacy. I, continued teaching some other grade levels, just kind of exploring. And there was a point where I realized that something was a little bit off. And it was weird because I literally felt like I had found my place, my space in the world.
Mhm.
And I was on this track, right? Like, I had decided that after getting my master's in literacy and, really getting into some leadership positions, my principals would ask me, to do different presentations and support some of the other teachers. And that all felt good. And I said, you know what? I've got a plan. I'm going to, become a principal one day
Mm.
or open my own school. That was the next step for me. And I was excited about that. It was like, okay, I'm the kind of person where I'm like, I've got the plan. I know the path. It feels good.
Mhm.
So I started working on another degree to, go ahead and get my principal certification going. And again, I hit a roadblock, a point where something started to feel different. And it was the first time that I kind of had this thought in the back of my head that maybe this is not exactly where I'm supposed to be anymore.
Mm.
And it started showing up in little ways where I would go to work and I would be in the middle of teaching and just start to feel like I was having an outer body experience. Like, I'm here, I'm teaching, but this doesn't feel right anymore. I actually started having some light health complications where I would
Mhm.
get really dizzy at work, and sometimes I'd have to leave early. And it was just this weird energy. And I couldn't explain at that time what was going on, but I just knew that something was off.
Mhm.
And it became clear to me that maybe I just wasn't in the right place. Sometimes you outgrow places, and I had been here in my hometown, teaching for years. And so I said, you know what? I think it's time for a move. I think I'm going to move. So I started applying to some different jobs in different states, some different teaching jobs, because I just felt like, maybe it's not the teaching that I need to move away from, but it's the atmosphere.
Okay.
So I started applying for different jobs. I was sending applications and, doing phone interviews and all the things. And I ended up, oddly enough, getting an invitation to do in-person interviews in 4 different places all at the same time.
Wow.
And at that time I was engaged, and I, told my fiance, and he's like, okay, that's great. That's exciting. And we were planning our wedding. And so there was a lot to consider in a move. But I said, you know what? He's on board. He's excited. He knew that there was some differences in me,
Mhm.
and that I was feeling like I needed something more. And so we both kind of felt like, a move could be good for us. We get married, we move. So I did a couple of interviews in some different places. And the one place of all the places that I applied that really felt like this could be a good fit for the both of us, for our family, was
Mhm.
Atlanta.
Mm.
So we decided that we would take the leap and we would move to Atlanta. So I'll never forget that summer. We got married one month and moved the very next.
Mhm.
And we moved to Atlanta, and I started my new teaching job. And I was so excited because it was like, oh, great. I feel rejuvenated again. That spark is there, that spark I had from the beginning. I'm feeling good. I remember stepping into that school building, and I remember thinking, this feels like a place that I belong. This feels like a place that really matches my teaching philosophy. And this feels like a place that I can really grow. And probably even have more autonomy, more flexibility to be and do and move the way I felt like I needed to move as a teacher to impact my students. So got going with the school year, and things were going great. My students were great. My colleagues were great. The most supportive team, literally, I had ever worked with.
Great.
They
Yeah.
were amazing. But interestingly enough, things were going, and I was moving, and all of a sudden, I would say about 3 months in,
Mm,
that feeling came up again.
mm,
And this time it wasn't a gradual feeling. It wasn't a slight feeling. It was like I went to work one day. It was one day we were supposed to go on a field trip. And literally when I walked in the building, it was an overwhelming feeling of, you are not supposed to be here.
mm,
I heard
mm.
the voice loud and clear, and I paused in my tracks. Literally, I was in the hallway. It stopped me in my tracks because I went, and I didn't know what to do with that because I'm like, I'm at work. What do you mean I'm not supposed to be here? I'm at work.
Mhm.
We just moved to Atlanta. What do you
Right.
mean? God, what's happening right now, right? So I had those thoughts, and it was interesting. I went throughout the day and moved on, but ever since that day, I actually started feeling a pull, a physical pull, this life that I was creating in Atlanta at this new job. And so I remember starting to go to work and feeling like, this isn't for me, but how could it not be for me? I spent all this time preparing for a teaching career. What's happening?
Mhm.
And I would go to work, and I remember it got to a point where I started crying on the way to work,
Mm,
just really being in a place where I didn't understand what was going on. Everything was so aligned. I had a plan.
mm,
Why was I feeling like this isn't where I was supposed to be? Wasn't the kids, wasn't my colleagues, but it was something so strong, so powerful that I literally could not shake.
mm,
During that time, I remember reaching out to my family, getting, good, sound wisdom from mom, from dad. And, they would tell me things like, listen to this, listen to that, to build your spirits up. Maybe you're just not in a good place spiritually, and you just need a little boost.
mhm,
So I did. I took that advice, and on the way to work, I'd listen to these powerful messages and listen to some TED Talks. I feed my soul. And at the end, when I pulled up at work, the tears came
mm.
again.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, no, like there's something seriously wrong. So it was one particular day, I had a conversation with one of my colleagues who was actually a grade level chair for our team. I sat down with her and I said, this is a safer person to talk to than my principal. I don't want to scare my principal. So let me have a conversation
Mhm,
with her. I told her what was going on. I told her what I was feeling, and she was so supportive. She said, it sounds like you need some time, right? We're about to go on fall break. And when we go on fall break, you're going to have an entire week to yourself. She said, take some time, pray, do things you love, just get in a place where, you're getting back to yourself, and use that time to decide what's really the next step for you. If you need some additional time after that, we can talk about what that looks like. Otherwise, if you feel great, you come back, rejuvenated, we move on. I said, okay, that's a great idea.
mhm,
This was around October. And so the fall break came, and I remember, feeling like, oh, I felt like I needed a good break. And it felt really good. And one particular night in the middle of the week, I had this weird dream about a train wreck. It was weird. I
mm,
was watching this train going, and it got to a point in the train track where it could either go right or go left. And I, as the dreamer, had to make a decision on which way it was supposed to go. Well, I chose left and it blew up.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh,
Mm.
what in the world? I had never paid attention to dreams before, Sia. Like, it was not anything that I had really, thought too much about. I've had dreams before, vivid dreams that I remember, but this one was like, whoa, I woke my husband up and I told him what happened. And it was interesting because it wasn't until later on that I realized that that dream was so symbolic of the decisions that we make about whether to go this way or that way
Mm-hmm.
and what's right, for us. But whatever direction I chose, it clearly was no longer the direction for me.
Mm.
And so Thursday came of this fall break, still on fall break, and I had taken my son to football practice. I picked him up. We were going to go to the grocery store, and then we were going to go home. After the grocery store, I remember driving on the way home and not making it home. We did not make it home that night. I literally remember waking up on the ground.
What?
Yeah,
Mm.
I woke up on the ground, and I actually thought it was another dream because I'm on the ground and I'm like halfway trying to open my eyes, and this police officer is standing over me and he's going, ma'am,
Mm.
ma'am. And I'm like, listen, I gotta go to work in the morning. What in the world is going on? I literally thought I was dreaming. And so I wanted the dream to get over quickly. I wanted the police officer to get out of my way. And I just wanted to, move forward. Well, it wasn't a dream.
Mm.
And I went back out again and woke up again in a hospital bed. And
Mm.
so I had been in a 4-car collision with my 7-year-old son.
Oh my gosh.
Did not realize
Mm.
the details of any of that until later, but I don't remember that car accident. And I spent an entire almost month in the hospital because I broke my neck, I broke
Oh.
my hip, and I broke my ankle. And I remember that it took them weeks to figure out which surgery they were going to do first.
Oh wow.
All of that time felt like such a blur to me because I was in and out. I was heavily medicated, right?
Mm.
I had all this going on. My family, they poured in to support and, came and helped my husband, helped out with my son. It was a long journey. After that accident, I literally was not able to go back to work for the rest of that year. That accident happened in October. Wasn't able to go back for the rest of that year, of course. And that the recovery process was so long. And I remember, and I'm just kind of going to skip over the parts of, me being in the hospital and me having to go to, rehab and me having to get in-house rehab. I mean, it was
Wow.
a lot. It
Mm.
was a lot. And it was so different for this woman who literally was a workaholic. Like, literally, there was a point where I was like, are the lesson plans done for the kids?
Mm-hmm.
I was worried about that. And my family, they were just like, Kristen, honestly, no big deal. At any rate, during that time of recovery, I did a lot of praying and a lot of soul searching and a lot of crying and a lot of everything else. And I just, asked God to reveal to me what was happening in my life right now because, the nudge started a year back before we had even moved. And then all of these feelings when we moved to Atlanta and I was in this new place and I thought things were right.
Mm.
And then this accident, it was like, what does this mean and what are my next steps? And I remember thinking that, I had always wanted to start a business. And while I was recovering, until I could go back to work, catch that last part, I
Okay.
said, I said I could always just, start a little business on the side. I started picking up some tutoring online. And it was light, there was not a whole lot that I could do. I had to learn how to walk all over again because I was wheelchair bound for months. And so it was interesting. I wanted something to do, something to, entertain me and to keep me moving forward. And, playing around with starting an online business was just the next step, and it felt really good. So I did that. And I remember, you know, and I'll go back to a part that's actually really important here. Before the accident and during the times where I was coming to work and crying a lot, I asked my mom a really important question. And that question was, what does faith look like?
Mm.
I wanted to know, does faith look like staying where you are and waiting on a door to open? Or does faith look like taking a step, right? Like doing the thing, jumping, right? Like going out there, whatever it is that you feel you should be doing, go do that and trust that it's going to fall into place, it's going to work out. And that's scary,
And
right?
what'd
Like,
she say? What'd she say? I'm interested.
well, she didn't give me a direct answer.
Oh,
She didn't give
okay.
me a direct answer. She said, it's really about what your faith looks like and what you feel like is best. And I weighed that question out for so many months. And after the accident, I came back to that question. I said, what does faith look like? What does faith look like? Because it came to a point where I had to decide, am I going to go back to work and get back in that grind, knowing that there was something there that wasn't right? Um, Maybe I wasn't supposed to be doing that thing anymore. Or did I need to take a leap? And I didn't know what the leap was
Right.
at the time. So because I did not know what the leap was, I ended up going back to work the April of that next year. So obviously school was almost over in April. I
Right.
went back to work in a boot, finished the year out. And I remember the assistant principal coming to me and saying, hey, next year we want you to be in a leadership position. So she was speaking to my, my teacher heart and that
Mhm.
previous path that I was so excited about. And so when she said that, that gave me something else to weigh. It's like, okay, do I get back on that path even though something felt off?
Mhm.
Or do I explore this other thing that I'm not sure of? Well, I did end up going back, but that next year was a struggle for me
Mhm.
physically. I was not ready to go back physically. I was still doing rehab twice a week, having to leave early. It was a lot. And so I ended up not being able to finish out the rest of that year
Mhm.
because things just got really, really tough physically. And I had to decide, do I want to feel better? Do I want to get back 100%? Or do I want to just keep pushing myself into a hole and I don't know where that's going to end up? So I ended up leaving early. And that was the point where I learned what faith looked like for me. Because at that time, I was without a salary for the
Mhm.
first time. And so we were relying on my husband's salary, and we had oodles of bills, right? Like most people
Mhm.
do. And it was difficult. It was so different for me. But during that time, I actually have been presented with quite a few opportunities to still do what I loved in education and be able to make money. I was blessed with an opportunity to start doing some literacy consulting and traveling to different schools on my own schedule. I could do that when I wanted to, however often I wanted to. So I did that for a while. And then I ended up working through a school that employed teachers to work with celebrities' children. And I did that and was able to get that experience for a while. So
Mm.
during that time, it really taught me that even though I was afraid to walk away from this job and this life that I knew, that God was always there and my needs were always met and we were never without, even when I wasn't working. But even when those opportunities presented themselves, I was able to help bring in money in our household. So when I realized that, I said, you know what? My faith looks like I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to start a business.
Wow.
So my first business I started was doing some copywriting online for entrepreneurs. And then I did that and was able to get quite a few clients. I still get clients asking me about copywriting work. And I eventually ended up being presented with an opportunity to get my coaching certification, which was really an interesting it was an interesting thing because I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do with coaching. I was like, coaching, what?
Mm-hmm.
But I went through the coaching program and I realized that what I was learning to do as a coach was actually something I had been doing for friends and family. I literally was, helping them to see their potential and use their personal gifts
Mm-hmm.
to start their own businesses. And I was telling them that even as a teacher, I
Right.
told them, you can create financial freedom for yourself. And so all those things that I was telling people, I was doing that for free. And I didn't even think that it was something that I could do as a career. And I ended up getting my coaching certification. And now that's what I do full time. And it feels so, so good. But I have to admit that for a very long time, there's a lot of guilt around leaving the classroom. There was so much guilt around leaving the kids and leaving that life because it was like, what happened to the little girl that spent so much time, playing school with her dolls?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, I also realized that there's a time, right, for everything. And those experiences, I don't think they were worthless at all. I bring so much of my teaching experience into my coaching. So yeah, that's pretty much how I ended up here
Wow.
from teaching.
Wow. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say the little girl who played with her dolls and had everything, the teaching aspect, you're still doing that, but it just looks
Yeah.
different. And sometimes for us, I'm an educator as well. That's my background. And I don't even know if we've talked about this, Kristen, but I've been a teacher, a counselor, an administrator. And this
Hmm.
whole world
Hmm.
and being this in this space, I started off in college. I was a mass media, they called it back then in the dark ages, major.
Hmm.
So I'm coming back
Hmm.
to something that I wanted to do years and years and years ago. So none of those experiences are wasted. I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah.
oh, you wasted all that time. It's like, you know what? You took what you had at that time and you're bringing it with you now.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I embrace that now. I think that's a really powerful lesson that a lot of people can benefit from. I have these conversations with people all the time wanting to transition out of careers or start their businesses, and they have a hard time letting go of that old identity. It really
Absolutely.
doesn't have to be old. It's just bringing that identity into what you're doing now.
Right. Absolutely. So, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned based on your journey?
Oh goodness, I have learned so many lessons. Um, I think the biggest thing for me is, when I think about that question that I asked my mom, that was so big,
Mhm.
and it was, what does faith look like? And I, for me, I learned to explore what faith looks like for me. I learned what faith looks like in action. Faith is a word that, for those who are spiritual, we throw it around a lot. And sometimes we don't really think about what that looks like when we are in motion, when we actually do the thing. I talk to so many people who are spiritual and they talk about faith and they talk about how, oh, yes, I have so much faith, and yet they are so fearful
Mm,
of taking the next step. They want to do this other thing. They've always wanted to start a business. They've always wanted to, do whatever it is, whatever goal they have. And there's always this like underlying fear.
mhm.
And fear and faith cannot coexist.
I thought I've heard that, and I'm so glad you said that. That resonates so much.
Yeah. I truly just believe that they don't coexist. And so if for everybody who is going on a personal journey and trying to figure out what faith looks like for them, I think it's really important to consider that question and weigh out everything. For me, I literally felt a pull away from the life that I knew. It was almost like I had no choice but
Mhm.
to step out on faith. That was what faith looked like for me. And the proof was in that transition before becoming an entrepreneur, even though I was still working for companies, it was flexible. But the point is that God was showing me your identity and all that doesn't have to be wrapped up in this job.
Right.
It's not this job that makes you, successful or who you are. I'm going to show you some other avenues. And then I'm going to let you, crawl before you walk and do this thing on your own. And now I'm doing it on my own. And it feels good.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's that, that learning of what faith looks like for you, and then also really knowing that your identity is not wrapped up in your job. I think a lot of people think that, and it's just not true. You are more than your job.
That's eh, that's a word, as they would say, Kristen, because it's interesting because as we're taping this, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. Well,
Yeah.
actually, please, Lord, well, let's hope we're in the like towards the end of it, but we'll see.
Yes.
Um, and I think that people are rethinking work and family and what's important and priorities. They're rethinking it all. First of
Hmm.
all, some of us have a lot more time to think about it, and
Yeah.
secondly, it takes sometimes sitting with yourself, sitting with your partner, sitting with your children, and saying,
Yeah.
this is great. This is exactly the life I wanted to build. Or,
Hmm.
this ain't it. This
Hmm.
is not it.
Hmm.
As soon as you open those
Absolutely.
doors, Governor, I'm out. Who knows? So I think the type of
Yeah.
work that you're doing is definitely something that is needed, especially for women.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, if somebody wanted to kind of get in contact with you and do this type of work with you, where would they find you?
So I am primarily on Facebook. That is where I'm hanging out all the time. You can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook business page at Kristen Elise Coaching, and I'll send you that link, Sia. And I also have a Facebook group for women who are interested in entrepreneurship and creating financial freedom for themselves and wanting to explore what that looks like. That Facebook group is The Rooted Entrepreneur. The Rooted Entrepreneur. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I have no doubt that people who will see and hear this some of it will resonate. I know there are a lot, thousands of educators who have this thought process every year, sometimes every day. Like, oh, okay, this is great, this is wonderful, but is this really what I should be doing? So I think your
Hmm.
story hopefully will help to guide someone to be able to kind of do that type of soul searching for themselves and to
Yeah.
contact you if to help with that soul searching as well.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to share my story. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh,
You have
well,
such a
thank you.
way of making me feel so comfortable.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. I really appreciate you saying yes to appearing on the show. And that's it for this episode of Lessons in Savvy Living. Until next time, everybody, stay savvy. Bye.